next thing I want to do, and if you're just joining this thread, I recommend checking out the previous couple of videos. This has been a series. I need to address the fact that my cello sound in this piece does not have an articulation change like what we experience here, right? We've got... So I want to be able to change sound. So in NoteFlight or any notation program, when you have a change like pizzicato, or even a change like staccato, a short note, accents, oftentimes what's happening is different samples are being triggered, right? It's a different recording, it's a different sound. So the question is, how are we going to do that in our DAW? And the first thing that we're going to do to be able to do this is we're going to go in to the effects here, and I'm actually going to add a second sound. Now, I can add as many instruments and effects as my computer can handle here. So I'm going to go into Spitfire Labs. Actually, I'm going to add another instance of Spitfire Labs, and if you're using some other program like Sign Factory, you would add another instance of that. And I am going to, again, search for strings. But this time, I'm going to go to their Strings 2 library. And I'm going to choose Pizzicato Ensemble. All right. Now, if I don't do anything else, what's going to happen here is I'm going to just hear both sounds, which could be cool and interesting. Let's hear it. That's not a terrible sound, but it's not what I wrote. What I want is to be able to switch in this instrument between those two sounds. There are a lot of different ways to do this using a DAW and using different kinds of samples. I'm going to deal with one of the most simple right now, and that has to do with using MIDI channels. So there are 16 channels in MIDI that we can send data over, and usually the default is for everything to just be set to MIDI any channel, right? And here, MIDI any channel. And what's actually happening, if I go into this MIDI, I'm going to pause just for a sec. We have a visit. So when we look at the MIDI information, there are actually 4 different views of the MIDI editor, and I haven't really talked about any of these yet. There's a notation view, which I haven't used much, and I find it to be mostly not that great, although it's a little helpful to be able to see the notes. The notation is often very strange. It doesn't look terrible right now. There's a named note view where you have the opportunity to name the notes, and that can be very useful, especially if you're working like with drums. But what I'm interested in here is this third view, which is kind of like the event list. And when we look at this event list, we can see where all the MIDI data is and on what channel the MIDI information is. So you see in the cello, everything is on channel 1. But if I were to look at the piano, let's look at the right-hand part of the piano. That all came through on MIDI channel 2. And if I look at the left hand, that is all MIDI channel 3. Now, it doesn't really matter that much in the case of the piano because I've got my MIDI channel set to any, and all of that data is going to register with this instrument and play. But we can use channels to our advantage if we simply go in and assign these two sounds, right, the long strings and the pizzicato ensemble, to different channels, right? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go into the MIDI channel here, and instead of any, I'm going to have my long notes on channel 1. And now I'm going to go to the second instance of the Spitfire Labs, the Pizzicato Ensemble, and I'm going to set that to channel 2. And what's going to happen at first when I do that is we're going to hear playback. But when we get to this, actually, let's see. It doesn't yet switch to pitch because I have to change those notes and I need to move them over to channel 2, right? It's these notes right here. So I can do this in a couple of ways. I can highlight them here where I can sort of see them. It's just these notes, right click. And then I can go over to this view, see they're highlighted, and I can set event channel to 2, right? And when I do that, it actually, you have to, it's a little bit of a bug in Reaper. It has changed, but I have to kind of navigate away and come back to see that change. So that's one way to do it. And if you're going to be doing this a lot, I strongly recommend setting a shortcut. So I'm actually going to undo that and show you how I like to do this. I'm going to go into my action list in the MIDI editor, right? And I'm going to look for that same language of set event channel. And you're going to see actually that I have set already 2 shortcuts. Set events to channel 1 and set events to channel 2, and I could make more shortcuts for 3 and 4, etc. And what's nice about doing this is now I don't actually need to even go to that other view, to the event list. I can just highlight these notes and I can set them to channel 2. Now you don't see anything change, but when you look here, it's been moved to channel 2. And another thing you can do is to change what the color is showing. Right now the color is showing velocity, but if I want to see different colors for different channels, I can choose channel. And now when you see it's a different color right there, and now, the problem here is that our velocities are very low, so I'm not really hearing them. So what I'm going to do is just kind of pull them up a bit so we can really hear that they are, in fact, playing. Right? I still might want to kind of take all of these, and I can highlight them with the right click, just these. Option, drag up, so I can kind of move them up proportionately. I really want them to cut through. And there we have it. So we're using multiple MIDI channels here to have multiple articulations, and I could have other articulations or even completely different sounds all the way up to 16 for this instrument, right? I can have 16 different articulations, 16 different sounds or samples, and then can switch very easily from within the DAW this way. Okay, that's it for now. That's channel switching, articulation switching via channel switching in MIDI, and on to the next thing.